Mama! Mama! It came!
Flora Ockhafer's hands trembled as she clutched the envelope, her name printed in bold letters across the front. She'd checked the mail 3 times that day, and now, finally, it was here. The acceptance letter. The golden ticket. Her escape. She burst through the front door of the cramped apartment, barely able to contain the scream of joy building in her chest. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, counting money. The money Flora had earned from her weekend market stall, the money that was supposed to be hers. Mama, it came, I got in. Flora waved the envelope like a flag of victory. Full scholarship to City University. I start in September. Her mother's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the worn linoleum. Let me see that. Flora handed over the envelope, still beaming, still foolish enough to believe her mother might be proud. Might smile, might hug her for the first time in years. Her mother pulled out the letter, scanned it briefly, and something dark flickered across her face. City University, she said slowly. Full scholarship. Yes, can you believe it? They said my entrance exam scores were in the top 5%. I can study business, Mama. I can get a real job. I can help us properly, not just. Girls don't need university. The words landed like a slap. Flora's smile faltered. What? Her mother's fingers tightened around the letter. You think you're special? You think some piece of paper makes you better than this family? Her voice rose with each word. Your brother is getting married next year. We need money for the ceremony, for the bride price, for a proper celebration, not for your selfish dreams. Mama, no, I can do both. I can work part-time while I study. I can still send money. You'll work full-time. You'll send every cent. That's what daughters do. Flora's heart hammered against her ribs. That letter is mine. I earned it. You can't. Her mother smiled then, a cruel twist of her lips. Can't I? In one swift motion, she tore the letter down the middle. The sound of ripping paper cut through Flora's chest like a blade. Once, twice, 3 times, until the acceptance letter was nothing but confetti scattered across the kitchen table. No, Flora lunged forward, trying to gather the pieces, but her mother swept them onto the floor. Get out, her mother said calmly. Get out and don't come back until you have money. Real money, not dreams, not paper. Cash for your brother's wedding. If you can't contribute to this family, you're not part of it. Mama, please. Get out. Flora stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face. Her younger brother appeared in the doorway, watching silently, saying nothing. He never did. She looked at him, pleading wordlessly for support for anything. He turned away. Flora grabbed her jacket and the small bag she used for market days. Inside was her phone, some clothes, and 300 naira, everything she had in the world. Her mother didn't even look at her as she walked toward the door. Don't bother coming back empty-handed, her mother called after her. Girls who can't contribute don't need a home. The door slammed shut behind Flora, and she stood in the hallway of their apartment building, shaking. The pieces of her acceptance letter were still inside, trampled under her mother's feet. 2 weeks later, Flora learned what hunger really felt like. Not the kind where you skip a meal and your stomach growls. The kind where you haven't eaten in 3 days and your vision starts to blur. The kind where you sleep on cardboard behind a closed shop and wake up to security guards kicking you awake. She'd tried everything. Every restaurant, every shop, every market stall. No one was hearing. Or rather, no one was hearing a 22-year-old girl with no experience and no permanent address. Some managers looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. One asked her to come back after hours, and the way he looked at her made her run. She sold her phone for food money. It lasted 4 days. On the 15th night of homelessness, Flora sat on a bench near the wealthy district, watching well-dressed people step out of expensive cars and into expensive restaurants. A woman in a tight red dress sat down beside her. Flora tensed, ready to move, but the woman just pulled out a cigarette and lit it. You look hungry, the woman said, blowing smoke into the night air. Flora said nothing. I know that look, the woman continued. Desperate, lost, trying to figure out which choice will destroy you less. She took another drag. How long have you been on the streets? 2 weeks, Flora whispered. The woman nodded. I was homeless for 3 months before someone gave me an option. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This isn't a nice option. It's not a good option, but it's an option. Flora stared at the card. A phone number, nothing else. What is it? A broker. He connects girls who need money with men who have it. One night, usually, sometimes less. The clients are vetted, wealthy businessmen, not street trash. You get paid up front. 500,000 naira per night. Flora's stomach twisted. 500,000 naira. Enough to get an apartment. Enough to eat. Enough to survive until she could find real work. I can't, Flora said, but her voice wavered. The woman stood, dropping the card on the bench beside her. I said the same thing once. Then I got hungry enough. She walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. Flora stared at the card for an hour. Then she picked it up. 3 days later, Flora stood outside the Imperial Hotel, the nicest building she'd ever seen in her life. Marble columns, gold-trimmed doors, doormen in actual uniforms. She wore a dress the broker had given her, black, simple, fitted. It felt like a costume for someone else's life. The broker had been surprisingly professional. No touching, no leering, just business. He'd explain the rules, show up on time, do what the client requests, take the money, leave quietly. The client for tonight was a businessman celebrating a major deal. Rich, the broker said, generous, drunk probably. Flora rode the elevator to the 12th floor, each second feeling like a countdown to her own execution. Room 1208. She stared at the numbers on the door for a full minute before raising her hand to knock. The door opened before she could. The man standing there was younger than she expected. Maybe early 30s, tall, handsome in the way wealthy men often were, well-groomed, expensive suit, cold eyes. He looked her up and down with all the interest of someone examining a delivered package. You're late, he muttered, his words slightly slurred. He'd definitely been drinking. I'm sorry, He pulled her inside and closed the door. The room was enormous, more like an apartment than a hotel room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A bottle of champagne sat in an ice bucket, and the man's suit jacket was already tossed carelessly over a chair. What's your name? He asked, pouring himself another drink. Flora opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't give him her real name, couldn't let this version of herself touch the person she used to be. Does it matter? She finally said. He shrugged, downing the champagne in one gulp. Not really. He moved toward her, and Flora's entire body went rigid. This was it, the point of no return. She thought of her mother's face as she tore the acceptance letter. She thought of the hunger, the cold nights, the fear. She thought of the 300 naira that had been everything she owned. The man's hand touched her shoulder, and she forced herself not to flinch. What followed was mechanical, distant. Flora felt like she was watching it happen to someone else, floating somewhere above her own body. The man was not cruel, but he was not kind either. He was simply there, using her the way one might use any purchased service. When he finally collapsed beside her, smelling of champagne and expensive cologne, she stared at the ceiling and felt nothing. Nothing except shame, so heavy it pressed the air from her lungs. The man fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even. Flora lay perfectly still, watching the city lights flicker through the window. The envelope of money sat on the nightstand, 500,000 naira, just as promised. Her salvation, her destruction. She waited until she was sure he was deeply asleep, then slipped out of bed as quietly as possible. She dressed in the dark, her hands shaking so badly she could barely button her dress. The envelope sat there, crisp and thick, more money than she'd ever seen in her life. She reached for it, her fingers touched the paper. She couldn't do it. Flora pulled her hand back as if the money had burned her. If she took it, that's what she was. That's who she'd become. A transaction. A purchased thing. She'd rather starve. She'd rather die on the streets than look at herself in the mirror knowing she'd sold the last piece of herself that mattered. She left the envelope on the nightstand and walked out of room 1208, closing the door softly behind her. By the time she reached the street, she was running. Tears streamed down her face, and she didn't stop until her legs gave out 3 blocks away. She collapsed against a wall, sobbing, her entire body shaking with the force of it. She'd hit bottom, and somehow she had to find a way to climb back up. 4 days later, Flora walked into Chen Industries wearing a borrowed uniform and carrying a mop. The cleaning supervisor had barely looked at her application before nodding. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., minimum wage, factory floors, office corridors, bathrooms, think you can handle it. Flora had nodded so eagerly she'd nearly given herself whiplash. Minimum wage, honest work, a chance to rebuild. Yes, I can handle it. The work was brutal. Her hands cracked and bled from the harsh chemicals. Her back ached from hours of scrubbing. But every morning when she clocked out, she felt a little more human. A little less like the girl who'd stood in room 1208. She rented a bed in a crowded boarding house, just a mattress in a room with 5 other women, but it had a roof and a lock. She saved every naira she could, eating once a day, walking everywhere, planning. By next year, she'd have enough to reapply to university. Maybe a different school, maybe a smaller scholarship, but she'd get there. The other cleaners gossiped constantly, about their families, their boyfriends, their dreams, and about the CEO. Cheng Mao, one woman whispered during a break. They say he's brilliant but ruthless, never smiles, never comes down from the executive floor except for major inspections. I heard he fired an entire department once because someone leaked company information, another added. Cold as ice, that one. Rich and handsome but probably has no heart. Flora said nothing. She kept her head down, did her work, stayed invisible. That was the key to survival. Be invisible, be useful, be forgettable. For 2 months, it worked perfectly. Then came the day everything shattered. Flora was scrubbing the factory floor on her hands and knees when she heard the whispers start. He's here. The CEO is doing an inspection. Everyone looked busy. Flora's stomach dropped. She grabbed her bucket and tried to slip away, to disappear into the storage room until the inspection was over. But Jade, the senior supervisor who'd hated Flora since day one, stepped into her path. Where do you think you're going? Jade smiled, but it was a predator's smile. The floor isn't clean enough. You're staying right here. Flora swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. She knelt back down and scrubbed harder, keeping her eyes on the floor. Maybe if she stayed small enough, quiet enough, he wouldn't notice her. Whoever he was. The CEO was just another wealthy man in a suit. She'd learned not to look at wealthy men directly. The footsteps approached. Expensive shoes, clicking against the clean tile. A small entourage following. The factory manager's nervous voice explaining production numbers, efficiency rates, safety protocols. Flora scrubbed harder, her heart pounding for no reason she could name. And down here is our sanitation team, the manager was saying. We maintain the highest cleanliness standards in the industry. Our workers are trained. Jade's hand suddenly planted between Flora's shoulder blades and shoved hard. Flora stumbled forward with a yelp, her bucket clattering loudly, soapy water sloshing everywhere. She crashed directly into someone's legs, her hands grabbing expensive fabric to stop herself from falling completely. Time slowed. Flora looked up and locked eyes with Cheng Mao. The world stopped, her heart stopped, everything stopped. It was him. The man from room 1208, the businessman, the client, the stranger she'd tried so desperately to forget. His face was exactly as she remembered, sharp jawline, cold eyes, the kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers. But in the harsh factory lighting, without the champagne haze, he was even more terrifying, more real. His eyes narrowed, scanning her face. She saw the flicker of recognition, the confusion, the wheels turning as his brain tried to place her. Flora scrambled backward, horror flooding every cell of her body. No, this couldn't be happening. I'm sorry, she gasped, her voice high and terrified. I'm so sorry, sir, I didn't mean. Have we met? His voice cut through her panic like a blade. The entire factory floor seemed to hold its breath. Jade was still standing there, her expression shifting from vindictive pleasure to uncertainty. No, Flora whispered. No, sir, I'm just a cleaner. I'm nobody. Cheng Mao's eyes didn't leave her face. She could feel him searching his memory, trying to connect the dots. She looked different now, thinner, exhausted, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, no makeup, no borrowed dress. Just a girl in a stained uniform who scrubbed floors for a living. Please don't remember. Please don't remember. Please. Pick up your bucket, Cheng Mao said finally, his voice flat and dismissive. Flora nearly collapsed with relief. She nodded frantically, grabbing the bucket and mop with shaking hands. She kept her head down, her face hidden. Continue the inspection, Cheng Mao told his manager, already moving past her. Flora stayed frozen as the entourage walked away. Her legs wouldn't work. Her lungs couldn't seem to pull in enough air. Jade leaned down, her voice venomous. Clumsy cow, clean up this mess. Flora nodded mutely and began mopping up the spilled water, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the mop. He was here. The man from that night was her boss, the CEO of the company, the man she saw every day on the motivational posters in the break room, in the company newsletters, in the photos of board meetings and charity events. She tried to sell herself to the CEO of Chen Industries. And now she cleaned his floors. Flora barely made it through the rest of her shift. Every shadow made her jump. Every footstep made her heart race. She kept expecting security to drag her away, for Cheng Mao to have remembered, for everything to come crashing down. But nothing happened. He was gone. The inspection was over. Life continued as if the world hadn't just tilted sideways. Flora clocked out at 6 a.m. and walked back to her boarding house in a daze. She climbed into her narrow bed, pulled the thin blanket over her head, and tried to convince herself that everything would be okay. He hadn't recognized her. He'd looked right at her and seen nothing but another poor girl scrubbing his floors. She was safe. She had to be safe. But 3 weeks later, Flora was bent over a toilet in the factory bathroom, vomiting up the small breakfast she'd managed to eat. It was the 5th morning in a row. She'd told herself it was stress, bad food, exhaustion. But she knew better. After her shift ended, she walked to a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away where no one would recognize her. She bought the cheapest pregnancy test they had, paying with coins she'd saved for food. In the boarding house bathroom, she sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at the small plastic stick in her hands. Her hands trembled so badly, she almost dropped it twice. 1 line meant not pregnant, 2 lines meant pregnant. She unwrapped the test and followed the instructions with numb, mechanical movements. Then she set it on the edge of the sink and waited. 3 minutes, the longest 3 minutes of her life. She thought of her mother tearing up her acceptance letter. She thought of the streets, the hunger, the fear. She thought of room 1208 and the shame that still sat like a stone in her chest. She thought of Cheng Mao's cold eyes looking through her like she didn't exist. She thought of her entire future, narrowing to a pinpoint. When she finally looked at the test, 2 pink lines stared back at her. Positive. Flora slid down the bathroom wall and sat on the filthy tile floor, the test clutched in her hand. She didn't cry. She was too empty for tears. She was pregnant with the CEO's child. The CEO who didn't remember her, who didn't even know her name, who'd used her body while drunk and forgotten she existed by morning. What was she supposed to do? Tell him, march up to the executive floor and announce that she was carrying his baby. He'd think she was lying. Or worse, he'd think she was trying to trap him. A poor cleaner suddenly pregnant by the rich CEO. No one would believe it wasn't a setup. She couldn't tell him. But she couldn't get rid of it either. Even if she wanted to, she couldn't afford it. She could barely afford to eat. Flora stayed on that bathroom floor for an hour, staring at the 2 pink lines, feeling the walls of her life closing in. Finally, she stood up, threw the test in the trash, and made a plan. She'd quit tomorrow. She'd take her last paycheck, leave the city, move somewhere no one knew her. She'd work until she couldn't anymore, have the baby, figure it out from there. Women did it alone all the time. She could too. She just needed 1 more day, 1 more paycheck. Then she'd disappear, and Cheng Mao would never know the girl he'd forgotten had left him something he couldn't forget. But the universe had other plans. 2 nights later, Flora was cleaning the executive floor at 2 a.m. She wasn't supposed to be there. Executive floors were usually cleaned by senior staff, but someone had called in sick, and Flora had volunteered for the overtime. She needed every naira she could get before she quit. The floor was empty, silent except for the hum of computers left running. Flora worked quickly, efficiently, emptying trash bins and wiping down desks. She was halfway through the corridor when a door opened behind her. I thought everyone went home hours ago. Flora's entire body went cold. She turned slowly. Cheng Mao stood in his office doorway, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face. He looked like he'd been working for days straight. "I'm sorry, sir," Flora said quickly, keeping her head down. "I'll finish quickly and leave." "No, it's fine, He stopped mid-sentence. Flora could feel his eyes on her, that same searching look from the factory floor. "Wait, you're the cleaner from the inspection, the one who fell." Flora's heart hammered. "Yes, sir. Again, I apologize for." "Have we met before that?" "No, sir." "You look familiar." Flora forced herself to meet his eyes, to look as blank and forgettable as possible. "I have one of those faces, sir. People say that a lot." He took a step closer, studying her. She could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle, the same scent from that night. Her stomach turned. "What's your name?" he asked. She couldn't lie about that. It was in her employee file. "Flora Ackeffer, sir." "Flora," he repeated slowly, as if testing the name against some memory. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you work before Chen Industries?" "Nowhere, sir. This is my first formal job." "How old are you?" 22. "And you're working night shifts as a cleaner?" Flora's hands tightened around her mop handle. "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. Because I need the money, sir." "For what?" Flora's patience, already worn thin by weeks of fear and nausea and exhaustion, finally snapped. "With respect, sir, why does it matter?" Cheng Mao's eyebrows rose. Clearly, no one spoke to him like that. Flora immediately regretted it. "I apologize, I just meant I should get back to work." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "I've seen you before, I know I have." Flora's blood turned to ice. She kept her back to him, not trusting her face. "I work here, sir. You've probably seen me cleaning." "No, somewhere else." Flora forced herself to turn around to look him dead in the eye. "I don't think so, sir. Now if you'll excuse me." She walked away before he could stop her again, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. Behind her, she heard his office door close. He was remembering, or trying to. It was only a matter of time. Flora abandoned her cleaning cart and took the stairs down to the ground floor, her mind racing. She had to quit. Tonight. Now, she couldn't come back. But when she reached the ground floor, she saw Cheng Mao's assistant standing by the security desk, holding a file. The woman looked up as Flora approached. "Flora Ackeffer." Flora's throat went dry. "Yes." "Mr. Cheng has requested your employee file. I'll need to review it with HR in the morning." Terror flooded through her. He was investigating her. He'd see her application, her background, her lack of work history. He'd start asking questions, and eventually he'd remember. "Is there a problem?" Flora managed to ask. The assistant smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Not at all. Routine inquiry. Have a good evening." Flora clocked out and walked into the night, her mind spinning. He knew something was wrong. He was digging. And when he found out she'd been desperate enough to consider prostitution when he connected her to room 1208. She had to disappear, now. Flora went back to the boarding house, packed her few belongings into a small bag, and counted her money. She had enough for a bus ticket to another city and maybe 2 weeks of food. After that, she'd figure it out. She'd survived this long. She'd survive longer. But as she zipped up her bag, a wave of nausea hit her so hard she barely made it to the bathroom. She vomited until there was nothing left, then sat on the floor, sweating and shaking. This baby was going to make running a lot harder. Flora dragged herself back to her bed and lay down, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Alone. Poor. Homeless again, probably. But hers. Not his, not Cheng Mao's, not the CEO's, hers. And no one, not her mother, not him, not anyone, would take this from her. She'd figure it out. She had to. But first, she had to get through the morning. Flora woke up to pounding on the boarding house door. The landlady's shrill voice cut through her exhausted sleep. "Flora Ackeffer, Someone here to see you. Flora sat up, confused. No one knew she lived here. No one ever visited. She stumbled to the door, still in her sleeping clothes, and opened it. Chang Mao stood in the narrow hallway of the boarding house, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit. Flora's heart stopped. Behind her, she heard the other women whispering, giggling. A man that handsome, that wealthy, looking for Flora? Impossible. "Can I speak with you?" Chang Mao said, his voice carefully neutral. "Alone." Flora glanced at the curious faces peering from other doorways. We can talk outside." She grabbed a jacket and followed him down the stairs, her mind racing with panic. How did he find her? Why was he here? What did he remember? They stopped on the street corner, far enough from the boarding house that no one could eavesdrop. Chang Mao turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "I looked at your employee file," he said. Flora's hands clenched inside her jacket pockets. "You were accepted to City University, full scholarship, top marks on your entrance exam." He paused. "Why are you scrubbing floors?" Flora's throat tightened. "Things change." "What changed?" "That's personal." "Is it?" Chang Mao took a step closer. "Because I also did some checking. You have no employment history before 2 months ago, no rental history, no credit history, nothing. Like you didn't exist until you showed up at Chen Industries." Flora's pulse thundered in her ears. So where were you between getting accepted to university and showing up at my company?" "That's none of your business." Chang Mao's jaw tightened. "I think it is." "Why? Why do you care where one cleaner came from?" He stared at her, and she watched the pieces click into place behind his eyes, the memory surfacing, the recognition finally connecting. "The Imperial Hotel," he said quietly. "Room 1208, 3 months ago." Flora felt the blood drain from her face. "It was you," Chang Mao continued, his voice dropping lower. "You were." "Don't," Flora interrupted, her voice shaking. "Don't say it." They stood in tense silence. A bus rumbled past. Someone shouted from a nearby market. Life continued around them while Flora's world collapsed inward. "Did you plan this?" Chang Mao finally asked, his tone shifting to something harder. "Getting a job at my company." Flora laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Plan this? You think I planned to scrub your toilets? You think I wanted to see you ever again?" "Then why?" "Because I'm poor," the words exploded out of her. "Because I had nowhere else to go. Because Chen Industries was the only place desperate enough to hire someone with no experience. I didn't know you were the CEO. I didn't know anything except that I needed a job or I'd starve." Chang Mao's expression flickered, surprise, maybe doubt. "If you needed money that badly, why didn't you take it that night?" Flora stared at him. "You remember that?" "I reviewed the hotel security footage. You left without the payment." Of course he did. Rich men always had ways to verify their suspicions. "I left it," Flora said tiredly, "because I couldn't live with myself if I took it. I thought selling my body would be easier than starving. I was wrong." "So you came to work for me instead?" "I came to work for anyone. Your company hired me, that's all." Chang Mao studied her face, searching for lies. "And now?" "Now I quit. I'm leaving the city. You'll never see me again." Just like that. Just like that. Chang Mao crossed his arms. "I don't believe you." Flora's temper flared. "I don't care what you believe. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not demanding anything. I'm walking away." "Why?" "Because I can't be near you." The confession burst out of her before she could stop it. "Because every time I see you, I remember the worst night of my life. Because you looked at me like I was nothing, because I was nothing to you. Just another transaction, another perk of being rich. And I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't keep pretending that doesn't destroy me." Chang Mao's face paled. For the first time since he'd shown up, he looked uncertain. "I was drunk," he said quietly. "I barely remember that night." "I know." Flora's laugh was hollow. "That's the problem. It was the worst night of my life, and you barely remember I existed." "If I'd known." "Known what? That I was desperate, homeless, would that have changed anything?" She met his eyes. "Would you have said no?" Chang Mao opened his mouth, then closed it. "That's what I thought," Flora said. She turned to leave. "Are you pregnant?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Flora froze. How did you? You've been sick. Multiple people mentioned it. You're working extra shifts like you're saving for something, and you're running away. He moved to face her again. Are you pregnant with my child? Flora's hands instinctively moved to her stomach. It's none of your business. If that baby is mine, it's absolutely my business. You don't get to decide that. Flora's voice rose, drawing stares from passers-by. She lowered it to a furious whisper. You don't get to forget I exist and then suddenly care because there might be consequences. You don't get to swoop in and act like you have rights here. I have legal rights. You have nothing. Tears burned in Flora's eyes. You were a stranger who paid for my body. That doesn't make you a father. That doesn't make you anything. Cheng Mao's jaw clenched. Is it mine? Flora wanted to lie. God, she wanted to lie. But she was so tired of lying, of hiding, of pretending to be smaller than she was. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it's yours and I'm keeping it and you can't stop me. I'm not trying to stop you. Then what do you want? Cheng Mao ran a hand through his hair, a crack in his controlled facade. I need, he stopped. I don't know. Well, figure it out somewhere else. I'm leaving. Where will you go? Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because, he struggled with the words, because I can't let you just disappear, not like this. Flora laughed bitterly. You don't get a say. I want a paternity test. There it was, the real reason. Flora felt something crack inside her chest. You think I'm lying. I think we need to be sure. No, Flora said flatly. No tests, no proof, no claim on my child. I'll raise this baby alone, you're off the hook. Isn't that what you want? Cheng Mao's eyes flashed. What I want is to understand what happened. You show up in my life twice, both times under impossible circumstances. Now you're pregnant and running away. How am I supposed to trust any of this? You're not, Flora shot back. You're supposed to let me go and forget I exist, like you did the first time. The words landed like a slap. Cheng Mao flinched, actual hurt flickering across his face before the mask slammed back into place. Fine, he said coldly. Leave, raise the baby alone, struggle, starve, I don't care. Good. But if you ever come back asking for money, I won't. If you ever try to use this child for, I won't, Flora's voice broke. I don't want your money, I don't want your help, I don't want you, I just want to be left alone. Is that really so hard to understand? They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the space between them charged with anger and hurt and 3 months of unspoken pain. Finally, Cheng Mao pulled out his wallet. He withdrew a business card and held it out. If you change your mind. Flora didn't take it. He set it on the wall beside her and walked away. Flora watched him get into a black car that probably cost more than her entire life. The car pulled away, and Flora was alone again. She picked up the business card, intending to tear it up, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. She stared at the embossed lettering. Cheng Mao, CEO, Chen Industries, a phone number, an email. Flora shoved the card into her pocket and turned toward the boarding house. She still had to pack, still had to leave. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. Because now he knew, and he'd looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, not a person who'd been hurt. Flora climbed the stairs to her room, lay down on her narrow bed, and finally let herself cry. For the girl she'd been before her mother destroyed her dreams. For the baby growing inside her who deserved better than this. For the future that kept slipping further out of reach. She cried until there were no tears left. Then she got up, washed her face, and started packing. She'd survived worse. She'd survive this too. But 3 days later, as Flora stood in line at the bus station with her single bag and dwindling cash, her phone, the cheap replacement she'd bought, rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Flora Ackheffer, an unfamiliar woman's voice. Yes. This is Mei Chen from Chen Industries, legal department. Mr. Cheng has requested that you return to the city for a meeting regarding. Flora hung up. The phone rang again immediately. She ignored it, bought her bus ticket, walked toward the platform. Her phone rang 7 more times before she finally turned it off. She was done, finished. He didn't get to summon her like an employee, like property. Flora boarded the bus to another city, found a seat by the window, and watched her old life disappear behind her. Good riddance. But 2 weeks into her new life, new city, new tiny room, new exhausting job at a restaurant, Flora woke up bleeding. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to send her rushing to a clinic in a panic. The doctor examined her and told her the baby was fine, just stress. But she needed to slow down, rest, eat properly, take prenatal vitamins. All things that required money Flora didn't have. That night, lying in her rented room, Flora pulled out Cheng Mao's business card. She'd kept it, though she didn't know why. Maybe as a reminder of everything she was leaving behind. Maybe as insurance. She stared at it for an hour. Then she picked up her phone. It rang 4 times before he answered. Flora, his voice was carefully neutral. I need help, she said quietly. Silence. I need the baby needs, I can't do this alone. The admission killed something inside her. I don't want your money, I don't want you involved, but I need. Where are you? Flora closed her eyes, gave him the address. I'll be there in 3 hours. He hung up. Flora sat in the dark room, her hand pressed against her stomach, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or the only choice she had left. 3 hours and 12 minutes later, Flora heard a knock on her door. She'd spent the entire time packing, second-guessing, considering running again. But she was so tired of running. She opened the door. Cheng Mao stood there, still in a business suit despite the late hour, but his tie was gone and his shirt was wrinkled. Like he'd dropped everything and driven straight here. His eyes swept over her, taking in the cramped room visible behind her, her exhausted face, the way she held herself like she might shatter. Can I come in? He asked. Flora stepped aside. He entered and the small room felt even smaller with him in it. He looked around, the single mattress on the floor, the hot plate in the corner, the pile of her few belongings. His jaw tightened. This is where you've been living. It's what I can afford. You're pregnant. You shouldn't be. I know what I shouldn't be, Flora snapped. Do you think I don't know? Do you think I want this? I'm doing the best I can. Cheng Mao held up his hands. I'm not attacking you, I'm just... He stopped, started again. What do you need? Flora's throat tightened. Asking for help felt like swallowing glass. The doctor said I need rest, better food, vitamins. I'm working double shifts at a restaurant, but I had some bleeding and... Her voice cracked. I can't lose this baby. Whatever else is wrong with my life, I can't lose this baby. Cheng Mao pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Flora asked. Calling my doctor. She specializes in high-risk pregnancies. I can't afford. I'm paying. He held up a hand before she could protest. Not as a favor, not to control you, because this is my child too, and I won't let either of you struggle because of my pride or yours. Flora wanted to argue, but she was so tired. And the baby needed help she couldn't give alone. Okay, she whispered. Cheng Mao made several calls, to his doctor, to someone about accommodations, to his assistant about clearing his schedule. Flora listened in a daze as he efficiently dismantled her carefully constructed walls of independence. When he finished, he turned to her. Pack your things. What? You're coming back to the city. I've arranged an apartment for you, separate from me before you ask. Fully furnished, safe neighborhood close to the hospital. The doctor will see you tomorrow morning. I can't accept. Flora, his voice was firm but not unkind. This isn't charity. This is me taking responsibility for my actions. You don't have to forgive me, you don't have to like me, but you do have to let me help. Flora stared at him, searching for the angle, the trap, the hidden price. What do you want in return? Nothing. Everyone wants something. Cheng Mao met her eyes. I want you and the baby to be healthy. That's all. No strings, no expectations. You can walk away after the baby is born if you want, but right now you need help and I'm offering it. Flora's eyes burned with unshed tears. Why? Because, he struggled with the words, because I've been thinking about that night, about you, about what you must have been going through to even consider. He stopped. I was drunk, thoughtless. I treated you like you didn't matter because in that moment you didn't. You were just a transaction, and that's... His voice roughened. That's unforgivable. I can't undo it, but I can stop making it worse. Flora sank down onto her mattress, her legs giving out. I don't know if I can trust you. I know. I don't know if I can forgive you. I know that too. Then why? Because it's the right thing to do, and because, he paused, because I looked at your university acceptance letter. I saw your scores, your recommendations, your essay about wanting to build businesses that employ women from difficult backgrounds. You had a future. You had dreams. And circumstances, including me, destroyed them. I can't give you back what you lost, but I can make sure you don't lose anything else. Flora pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. She'd been strong for so long, survived so much, but his words cracked something open inside her, and she couldn't hold it back anymore. She cried, deep, wrenching sobs that tore through her entire body, for her mother's betrayal, for the streets, for room 1208, for every moment of fear and shame and hunger, for the baby growing inside her who deserved so much better than this broken start. Cheng Mao didn't try to comfort her, didn't touch her. He just stood there, witnessing her pain, letting her break apart without trying to fix it. When she finally stopped, empty and raw, he held out a handkerchief. Flora took it, wiped her face. I'm not doing this for you, she said hoarsely. I'm doing this for the baby. I understand. And I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I understand that too. Flora looked up at him. If you try to take my child, I won't. If you try to control me, I won't. If you make me regret this, then you can walk away. Anytime, I promise. Flora wanted to not believe him, but she was so tired of fighting alone. And the baby, she couldn't risk the baby for pride. Okay, she said finally. Okay. Cheng Mao nodded. I'll wait outside while you pack. He left, closing the door gently behind him. Flora sat alone in the tiny room that had been her refuge and her prison. She touched her stomach, feeling the slight curve that was just starting to show. I hope I'm doing the right thing, she whispered to the baby. I hope I'm strong enough to protect us both. But she packed her bag, locked the door one last time, and followed Cheng Mao into an uncertain future. Because sometimes survival meant accepting help from the last person you wanted to need. The apartment Cheng Mao brought her to was overwhelming. Not a mansion, he'd been smart enough to know she'd refuse that, but a clean, modern 2-bedroom with actual furniture, a full kitchen, and windows that let in real sunlight. Flora stood in the living room, turning in slow circles, not quite believing it was real. The lease is in your name, Cheng Mao said, handing her keys. Not mine, you're not my tenant, you're just living here. For how long? As long as you need. Flora wanted to ask about the catch, but she was too exhausted. When's the doctor's appointment? 9 a.m. I'll pick you up at 8:30. You don't have to. I want to, he paused, unless you'd prefer I didn't. Flora considered. Part of her wanted to shut him out completely, but he was the father whether she liked it or not, and he was trying, really trying. Fine, she said, you can come. Cheng Mao nodded. There's food in the kitchen, prenatal vitamins on the counter. My number is programmed into the phone on the table. Call if you need anything. I won't need anything. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Probably not, but call anyway if you do. He left, and Flora was alone in the apartment. She walked through each room slowly, touching the walls like they might disappear. The bedroom had an actual bed, a real bed with a real mattress and sheets that didn't smell like other people. The bathroom had a tub. Flora ran a bath, the first real bath she'd had in months, and sank into the hot water, crying again because it was so simple and so impossibly luxurious. And she hated that she'd fallen so far that a bathtub felt like a miracle. But she let herself have it, let herself feel safe just for a moment. The next morning, Cheng Mao arrived exactly at 8:30. He drove her to an expensive medical center where his doctor, a warm woman in her 50s named Dr. Lin, examined Flora thoroughly. The baby's heartbeat is strong, Dr. Lin said, smiling. Everything looks good, but you're underweight and anemic. We need to fix that. She prescribed vitamins, dietary changes, and most importantly, rest. No more double shifts, she told Flora firmly. No more heavy lifting. Your job right now is growing a healthy baby. I need to work, Flora protested. I need money. Dr. Lin glanced at Cheng Mao, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner of the exam room. That's between you two. Medically, I'm telling you to slow down or you risk complications. After the appointment, Cheng Mao drove Flora back to the apartment. They sat in the car for a moment, neither speaking. I'll cover your expenses, he finally said, so you can rest. I don't want to be dependent on you. I know, but right now you don't have a choice. Flora hated that he was right. After the baby is born, we'll figure it out. But for now, focus on being healthy. Flora nodded reluctantly. I want to go back to school eventually. Cheng Mao pulled something from his briefcase, a folder. He handed it to Flora. She opened it. It was her university acceptance letter. Not the original torn one, a new one, for next semester. Full scholarship restored, with additional support for single mothers. Flora stared at it, unable to speak. I contacted the university, Cheng Mao said quietly. Explained the situation, not everything, just that you'd had family difficulties. They were willing to reconsider your admission. This is yours, Flora. Whether you want me involved or not, your education is yours. Flora's hands shook. How did you? I made some calls, made a donation. The details don't matter. What matters is you earned this. Your mother had no right to take it, and neither did I. Flora clutched the letter, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Just use it. Be the person you were supposed to be before everything went wrong. Flora looked at him, really looked at him, saw the guilt etched into every line of his face. The man who'd thoughtlessly used her body was trying to become someone different, someone better. It didn't erase what he'd done. It didn't fix the past. But it was something. I can't start until after the baby is born, Flora said. I know, the acceptance is open-ended. Start when you're ready. Flora nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay. They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Cheng Mao said, Can I ask you something? Maybe. Why didn't you get an abortion? I'm not judging, you had every reason to. Flora pressed her hand to her stomach. Because I've lost everything else. My family, my education, my dignity. This baby is the only thing that's truly mine. The only thing no one can take from me. She met his eyes. And maybe I wanted something good to come from that night. Something that mattered. Cheng Mao's expression cracked. For a moment, he looked devastated. Then he composed himself. I'll be a good father. If you let me, I don't know how yet, but I'll learn. You'll have to prove it. I know. Flora got out of the car, clutching the acceptance letter like a lifeline. At the apartment door, she turned back. Cheng Mao. He rolled down the window. Yes. Thank you for this, for trying. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Flora went inside, and Cheng Mao drove away, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He'd thought being rich and powerful meant he could fix anything. But Flora's pain wasn't something money could repair. Her trust wasn't something authority could command. He'd have to earn it, day by day, choice by choice. And he would, because that baby, his daughter or son, deserved better than a father who walked away from his mistakes. The next few months passed in a strange, careful dance. Cheng Mao showed up, not constantly, not oppressively, but consistently. Doctor's appointments always, grocery deliveries weekly, check-in calls brief and respectful. Flora kept her distance emotionally, but accepted the practical help. The baby grew. Her strength returned. She started attending prenatal classes, began planning for the birth. One evening, 6 months into the pregnancy, Cheng Mao called. Can I take you to dinner? Flora hesitated. Why? Because I'd like to talk, not about logistics or medical appointments, just talk. Against her better judgment, Flora agreed. They went to a quiet restaurant, nothing too fancy, which Flora appreciated. Over dinner, Cheng Mao told her about his childhood. Wealthy but lonely. Parents who measured worth in profit margins. A brother who died in a car accident when Cheng Mao was 15. The pressure to be perfect, to never fail, to treat everything, including people, as transactions to be managed. I'm not making excuses, he said, but I want you to understand. I didn't see you that night because I'd been trained not to see people, just assets. opportunities, obstacles. And now, Flora asked. Now I'm trying to see people, really see them. It's harder than it sounds. Flora considered him. You're not the man from that hotel room anymore. No. No, that man didn't care. You care too much now. It's almost painful to watch. Cheng Mao laughed, a real laugh. Is that a compliment? Maybe. Their eyes met, and something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile thread of understanding. Over the next weeks, Cheng Mao became more than a walking checkbook. He read parenting books, asked Flora about her preferences for the baby, started attending prenatal classes with her. The other couples in class assumed they were together. Neither corrected them. One night, Flora went into labor. 3 weeks early, sudden and terrifying. She called Cheng Mao at 2 a.m., gasping through contractions. He arrived in 15 minutes, must have broken every traffic law. He drove her to the hospital, held her hand in the elevator, stayed by her side as the doctors examined her. The labor was long and difficult, 23 hours of pain and fear and exhaustion. Cheng Mao never left. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered encouragement when she wanted to give up. I can't do this, Flora sobbed at hour 19. I can't. Yes, you can, Cheng Mao said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. You survived homelessness. You survived me. You can survive this. Flora laughed through the pain. That's a low bar. And yet you cleared it beautifully. At hour 23, the baby finally came. A girl, tiny and perfect and screaming with outrage at being evicted from her comfortable home. The nurse placed her in Flora's arms and Flora broke down completely. Her daughter, her baby, the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Cheng Mao stood at the edge of the bed, tears streaming down his face, staring at this tiny person he'd helped create. She's perfect. She is, Flora whispered. She looked up at him. Do you want to hold her? Cheng Mao's breath caught. Can I? Flora nodded. He stepped closer, and she carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Cheng Mao looked down at his daughter, this small, vulnerable life that was half him, half Flora, and something inside him broke and rebuilt itself simultaneously. Hi, he whispered to the baby. I'm your father, and I promise I will never let you doubt that you matter, that you're seen, that you're loved. Flora watched him, watched this powerful man reduced to tears by a 6-pound baby, and felt something in her chest loosen. Not forgiveness, not quite, but maybe the beginning of it. What should we name her? Cheng Mao asked. Flora had been thinking about this for months. Zinayo, new joy. Cheng Mao smiled through his tears. It's perfect. They stayed like that, Flora in the hospital bed, Cheng Mao holding their daughter, both of them exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified, for a long time. Finally, Flora spoke. I still don't forgive you, not completely. I know. But I think, maybe someday I could. Cheng Mao looked at her. That's more than I deserve. Probably, Flora agreed. But our daughter deserves a father who's learning to be better, and you're trying, really trying. I'll keep trying, every day. Flora held out her hand. Cheng Mao took it, careful and gentle. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and neither spoke. Words felt inadequate for the strange, complicated thing growing between them. Not love, not yet, but maybe the seeds of it. Trust, earned slowly. Respect, built on action, not promises. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't perfect. But it was real, and for now, that was enough. 6 months after Zinayo's birth, Flora walked across a stage in a cap and gown, diploma in hand. Cheng Mao sat in the audience with their daughter in his lap, both of them cheering as Flora's name was called. Top of her class, full honors. After the ceremony, Flora found them. Zinayo reached for her, and Flora took her daughter, pressing kisses to her chubby cheeks. You did it, Cheng Mao said softly. We did it, Flora corrected. Then more quietly, I couldn't have without you. Cheng Mao pulled something from his pocket, a small frame. Inside was Flora's original acceptance letter, the one her mother had torn, pieced back together with gold resin in the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, making broken things beautiful. Some things can't be fixed, he said, but they can be made into something new, something stronger. Flora stared at the repaired letter, the gold seams turning destruction into art. She thought of herself 6 months ago, broken, desperate, certain she'd never be whole again. She thought of herself now graduate mother survivor. "Thank you," she whispered. Cheng Mao touched their daughter's hand, then met Flora's eyes. "Thank you, for giving me the chance to be better than I was." Flora smiled, tentative but real. "Ask me to dinner." "What?" "You heard me, ask me to dinner. A real one, not strategy, not logistics, just us." Cheng Mao's face transformed with hope. "Flora Akaffer, would you have dinner with me?" "I'll think about it," Flora teased, then her smile widened. Yes, I will." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. The scars from that night would never fully fade, but scars were proof of survival. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, broken things could be made beautiful again. Not by forgetting what happened, but by choosing, day after day, to build something better from the pieces. Flora looked at her daughter, then at Cheng Mao, then at her diploma. She'd lost everything once, and she'd built it all back, not the same, but stronger. And that was more than enough. That was everything.